Good morning and welcome to this week's recruitment webinar, recruitment discussion. This week we're going to talk about, are your retention strategies working? And have you stopped that revolving door? And it's important that we start to think about that revolving door and what that looks like as we start to move into the second half of this year. So as always, let's look at some sort of stats about retention and what retention means and how that works. Likely appropriate management skills make employees 4 times likely to quit. So a lack of appropriate management skills making employees 4 times likely to quit. Employees that don't recognize when they do great work are almost 2 times likely to be hunting for a job. Career advancements, what they're saying is in the big studies that I looked at, career advancement retains talent. It revealed that employees who feel that their progression in their careers are 20% more likely to stay within a company for the following 12 months. So you've got to start to look at that as what are you doing to advance people's careers? Millennials are 22 times more likely to work with a company that has high trust culture. A sense of purpose has a sizable impact on employee retention. So employees who believe their companies have a higher purpose other than profit are 27 times more likely to stay within the company. A lack of respect loses employees. And according to all the research I looked at, employees who say they are or say there's a low level of respect between colleagues are 26 times more likely to quit their job, and 61% of employees who trust between themselves and the senior management isn't there say they're more likely to be leaving because of lack of job satisfaction. Professional growth is the leading priority for most people. It was revealed that 93% of employees said they'd stay longer with a company that invested in their careers. And companies that support remote working have a 25% lower employee turnover than companies that don't. And high employee engagement rates lead to people being 87% more likely to leave their company. 1/3 of new employees quit after 6 months. Wow. And a good onboarding program can lead to a 69% of employees staying for at least 3 years. So that's a really interesting fact. 69% of employees would stay for 3 years with a good, strong onboarding program. So that says that the onboarding program doesn't last for that first couple of weeks when you put somebody on. It's what does that look like? This week, we've got Mr. Jacobs back in the saddle. Unfortunately, Dave is in hospital. His son broke his leg last night, so we wish his son Woody a speedy recovery. And Heather, I've just found out, has got COVID. So me complaining about my flu coming back from holiday isn't going to cut any mustard with Heather whatsoever. So let's kick off. Mr. Jacobs, welcome back.
It's lovely to be here.
Good. Let's kick off with a really big question first, because this question I get asked constantly at the moment. As the mood of companies start to change and some want their people back in the office full time, some want to sort of go a bit like Apple, who've now set a number of days per week that their employees have to be in the office. What would your advice be? Fully in, part in, consultant's choice? What would it be and why?
I mean, you're right. This is a question that people are asking all the time at the moment. And I can tell you that I think you've had the same experience, Howard, that a lot of employers are now saying they want their people in most of the time. I'm certainly seeing that and hearing that. Interestingly, when you talk to the consultants themselves, most of them that I speak to, particularly of a certain age group, want to come in. They want to be with their colleagues. They want to be working in the office. They like the vibe. They enjoy being with their colleagues. And they find that sort of experience, that collegiate experience, useful to them in terms of their binding with the culture of the business and so forth. It's interesting because, as you said, I mean, even Apple recently have been talking about wanting their people in most of the time. I do think it varies. I think certainly from an employer's perspective, and again, my clients are definitely looking at it from this perspective. They are looking at individual situations. And it's definitely easier, I think, in many instances, and I'm generalizing here, to allow people with a great deal of experience and proven ability to work from home more often. But I think when you're looking at particularly younger people getting into our industry, and you mentioned the point about onboarding. As we know from the COVID experience, it's very, very difficult, quite challenging to coach and train people when they're new to the industry and they're at home a great deal of the time. I think when you've got new people who are impressionable and need a lot of assistance and support, they do need to be in the office, if not all of the time, the majority of the time. But what I've already said is that my experience tells me that they're the very same people that actually want to be in the office most of the time. There's definitely a trend now in getting people back into the office. If you go into London, you'll see, particularly if you come out onto the tubes and you come out and say Liverpool Street, it's mad again. It feels back to normal. You go and park your car at a station, a tube station, you can't find a space. So I think that there's no question that people have gone back to work. The majority of people are now working in the office the majority of the time.
So I think my answer to the question is very simple. It's, it's based around attraction and retention. Does it help attract more people? Yes. Will it help retain more people? Yes. However, it then all links back to your culture. If your culture is really strong within your office, then people are more likely to want to be in the office because they enjoy the office culture. If your culture is a little bit sour in the office, then I think some employees tend to want to shy away from that. But giving them the choice or giving them an opportunity, and I think what you said there about new starters, I was working with a company a couple of weeks ago, and we were setting up their policies for this. And they were saying in the first 6 months, the people have to be in the office 100% of the time. In the next 6 months, then they can choose a day that they can be out. And then after the first 12 months, they can then choose what they want to do from a work, life balance. It was really interesting. He said, well, how do we get people to stay? I said, you've just got to work on your culture, and your culture has to be one of inclusiveness, one of, that people want to be part of, because then why would they leave the office? Why would they go away from the office? So it's a big challenge, I think, where I think, yes, it attracts people. Yes, it definitely retains people. But if you want people in the office and develop people properly, then you have to grow a culture that enables that. And I think that's the bit that we've got to think about. It's all about the culture and why people stay and why people leave. It's interesting, though, one thing that we're saying, again, that we're seeing constantly all the time, this is the bit that I'm getting thrown at me. We've got a good training plan for new people coming in, and we can't keep them beyond 6-12 months. And it was interesting, one of the stats there was that, a third of new employees leave within 6 months. And I think that's because, there's massive opportunity out there for people, and people are offering money. And we hear people can get anywhere between 10 and 20% uplift on an employee's salary. And certainly there's lots of R2R circling around for consultants between 6 to 18 months. So how do we keep our rising stars in your business when there's a huge opportunity out of them to get a significant increase even before they've actually started their real recruitment experience?
Look, Howard, this subject, the question's a great question, but this isn't kind of a new thing. We know as experienced professionals that when we place people in jobs, the danger period for that new employee is the first 12 to 16 weeks. If people are likely to leave a new job, the highest level of leavers is likely to occur in that first 3-4 months. And the reason for that is that it's often down to poor onboarding, people not being integrated into companies correctly, not being coached properly, not being looked after correctly, no buddy systems, nobody taking care and attention, often people being thrown in the deep end, no confidential one-on-ones, and so on and so on. We know that. We warn our employers, our clients, to take care in the first 12 to 16 weeks to make sure that people are bought into the culture. If you lose people, you tend to lose them, at least certainly mentally, in their first 12 to 16 weeks. So we know that already. We've been working on that premise forever. I mean, for nearly 50 years in the industry, I've always known that placing somebody in a job, the danger period is the first 3-4 months. Now, that applies to us too, in our industry. When we take on people, there needs to be a tremendous amount of thought and effort put into integrating, onboarding our new people. And that isn't just about coaching and training, and obviously starting to teach them how, if they're brand new into the industry, how to teach them how to do recruitment. It's a lot to do with your earlier point about the culture in the office and people around them. And certainly, we talked about making sure people are feeling comfortable. Now, we know for a fact that they're likely, if they're unlikely, I should say, if they're unhappy in a job, to go and talk to the owners of the business. Most people won't expose their emotions to the leaders. So important, I think, to make sure the new people have somebody they can talk to that's on their level, a peer group member, someone that can take care of them, put their proverbial arm around their shoulders to make sure that they're settling in. And where there are any potential issues, we deal with it quickly. We don't wait for the situation where it becomes something that we can't recover from. So I think this point about getting people to integrate into businesses is vital. After the first 3-4 months, if we've done our job correctly, we start to win hearts and minds to a larger extent. And obviously, as they start to become more and more successful, their confidence builds, you're hoping you can start really integrating that person and start moving them towards a point where they become an individual that wants to stay in the company. And your point here about losing people within 9 to 18 months is a really concerning point, because it is a fact that, and I hear it from my clients, that the vultures are circling around people that have been in our business, brand new people, within their first 9 to 18 months. So they're getting tapped up, to use that expression, by Rec to Recs or by competitors. So once we've started to train them and they're starting to get some moderate level of success, they become prime targets for our competitors or for Rec to Recs. This is why we can never be complacent. It's also why we consistently have to talk about how they're going to be progressing, their opportunities to develop in the business, giving them more and more responsibilities where we can, constantly, daily, like a daily mantra, talking about the vision and the goals of the business, where the business is going and what's in it for the individuals in the company, how they're going to benefit from the growth of the organization, and really also taking a personal interest in the person. People do stay in businesses not just for salary, but in fact, most people will work for a purpose. People work for a purpose and a vision.
Well,
salary is less important.
Let's park that, because we're going to talk about salary a little bit. I always said that if you make it a hard place to get into, but make it a harder place to leave,
yeah, exactly,
then that's all about what you do once the person walks through the door. So the first thing is, are you recruiting the right people to come through your door? And the second thing, once you come through the door, how do you treat them from there? And one of the things that we sort of talk about a lot on our management training is the terror of that people feel when they come into a new position, and the terror that people feel when they come into a new job. And then we talk about the terror of management. And terror, with me being dyslexic, I spell T-E-R-A, but the T stands for tribe. Are you creating a tribe? Are you with me? Are you against me? So how, when new people feel, do they feel that you're with them? Do they feel that they're part of you? So that's understanding where the business is going, what they're doing in the business, how they can help with the business, how the business can help them, etc., is really important. But I think the E bit is even more important, that expectation. What are their expectations to be delivered to the business? But more importantly, what are the expectations of the business delivering back to them? And that's the bit that you start to see. If you can start to see where your career path is going, and you can see what is expected to be delivered to you by your company, then it gives you a massive opportunity to start to think about, why you're staying within that company. And it's interesting that you see people that are losing people at that sort of, 6 to 9 months period to that 18-month period. Do they understand fully what they are walking away from? But it's no point explaining that when they're starting to walk. They should already have that. So when people start to talk to them, they already have that in their mindset. And so they should be asking those questions. Then we've got to start to think, if we're not saying that to our employees, then how do they know? So how do you know they're with you? And how do you know that the expectation is where they're going and the direction is where they're going? And I think that's the bit that we've got to start to talk about. And the bit you started to talk about there was salaries. Yes. And what salaries are, during lockdown, salaries dropped out of the top 5 things that were important to consultants. It's now coming back in, but it had dropped out. So if we start to think about anything else, what would you focus on when it comes to package to help keep your consultants? Because that's still one of the key drivers is package, but it's not all about money. There's lots of things that go with package. So what else would you think about?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is one of those, I mean, the subject that you're talking about here is a daily subject for people like you and me with our clients. And it's in a sense, it's a war you can't win. You can never put yourself in a position where you're the best payer in your vertical or in your territory, or you give the best benefits. There's always somebody out there that's going to pay more or offer better benefits. It's just a war that you can't win. It's important, obviously, to make sure that the salaries you're offering, the benefits package that you put on the table to your people is comparable, hopefully at the leading edge of what people can get. But there is a limit to what any business can provide, and getting into that bidding war it's just a losing situation. I wouldn't do it. So you have to be clear in your own mind that you're providing a very competitive salary without particularly going crazy. You can't overdo things, and of course keeping in mind that you've also got other people in the business, and you've got to make sure that it's measured, that you're not going to put people's noses out of joint. People always talk about salaries, by the way. You ask them not to, but they do. So there has to be consistency in salaries and benefits, because word gets out when you bring people in or you give increases. People always find out. So it needs to be consistency. Sometimes there are things you simply can't do. You can afford to do them, but you don't do them because of the problems it will cause internally. So when you're looking at packages these days, I think it's often around things, if you're looking at the sort of modern world of work, that go over and above the standards. Definitely, when we look at reasons why people are interested in certain benefits, number one, and it's really simple, and it tends to come out time and time again, are holidays. People want a fair number of holidays. Okay, that's easy. We can sort that one out. But I think when you think about other things, and we now look at providing staff annually with a certain sum of money that they can spend on themselves. So, for example, if they want to learn to play the guitar, or they want to learn to swim, or they want to learn to, I don't know, fly a plane or whatever it is, we give them a certain amount of money every year that they can use to improve themselves inside or outside of work. Those things tend to matter to people. I think education matters to people. So, what's important, I think, when you bring people in, is to make it very clear to them that there's going to be opportunities from a learning and development perspective, both internally and externally. Because the reason people stay in businesses is not always, in fact, almost rarely, the reason is to do with money. It's mostly to do with self-development. If they feel they're progressing, the company is progressing, that they feel valued by their employer, not just in terms of a pat on the back when they've made a placement, but really valued by their employer as a human being, and that value is expressed in how they're developed in the organization in terms of their development training and experience and knowledge and promotional opportunities. People are very likely to stay in that company, particularly if the company is truly going somewhere. That the words they heard on the initial interviews were not hollow, but what they've heard and what they experience when they join a business are consistent. So I think it's very wrong to get too stuck into this subject of salaries and benefits, even though it's extremely important, particularly at a point when inflation is moving into double digits. We know that's important. I'm not saying it's not important, but I think there's so much more above the line that we need to be thinking of in relation to keeping people engaged in the company.
And I think it's important. It's interesting. Karen Leaps coming here. So we need to move away from package and need to focus on the overall offering, of which the package is is an aspect, and it depends how you proportion that. And this goes back to that question. If you've set a figure and say we're going to spend £40,000, which includes everything you want to spend on that person, so you've got your basic salary, then you've got the add-ons that go with that and the commission. I remember being at CP, and we introduced almost a smorgasbord of this is what you can purchase, this is what you can buy. And one of them is you could buy more holidays, one of them you could do this. You could put all the money in your pension if you wanted to, etc., etc. So you could choose what you could do with that money that the company was going to invest in you. And I thought that was because you had a personal choice that helped people stay within the company. And it also gave people a choice of what they do. Me at a certain age, you want probably more money into your pension. At another certain age, you probably want to put more money into your own self-development, etc. And so it's understanding that if you can give people choice, then that gives them a better understanding of, make it hard for them to leave. you're offering them things that other people can't offer, or feel that they can, only the big boys can offer these type of things. Well, no, actually, you can actually go and do all of these things and set them up yourselves. And actually, then it gives the really good positive outlook. And that's part of, are you being part of that tribe? How do you make people feel within your business? Do you make them feel important or not important? And it's all about the things that you can put down too. So if you can't pay a higher salary, your comment on holidays was really quite interesting. And I've spoken about this before.
Yeah.
I ran a company and we pushed in unlimited holidays. And guess what? People actually took less holidays. Why? Because they didn't feel the pressure. We also had in, you could come to work at any time that you liked. And guess what happened? People got to work earlier and stayed work longer, because there wasn't this all of a sudden being dictated to of what you could do. They feel that they had the freedom of choice, which was far better. Yes, there were strings attached to everything that we did, but those strings were all about their performance, and therefore they were in control of the strings, not ourselves. And I think when we start to think about what can we do as regards to the overall package, it's looking at what that can give to each individual person. And I know Kandeep's sort of running on a package where you can choose your own salary, but your salary will then dictate what your actual target will be at the end. So you can start to think about, choose your salary, hit your target. You could choose your salary and limit the number of commissions that you could pay. There's all sorts of different things you can do, but it's about being innovative with that viewpoint rather than being locked into, right, these type of people only earn this amount of money, etc., etc., etc. Let's start to look at how we can develop people and give them the freedom of choice rather than us being more prescriptive. If we looked at that, then recruitment owners, you talked about almost selling the dream.
Yeah.
Okay. And what I tend to see is that we have this great big sort of script or comments that we make to employees when they come and start the business. And yet quite a lot of that is never delivered on. And certainly interviewing lots of consultants, you seem to find out, well, what did you have at your old company? They said they do this, and this, and they never have done that. Okay. So how should a business address what they are selling to new employees and employees that are in the business in order to help retain those employees?
Well, firstly, being the total alcoholic, I nearly said, being the total workaholic, there was a Freudian slip out, that I am. I used to sell all my holidays. I used to sell loads of holidays back in the days when we worked together. I wouldn't prescribe that, by the way, but if you were putting me in a poll, I'd probably be the diametric opposite to everybody wanting more holidays. This point here is all about making sure that what you tell people is the truth. You talked about tribe earlier. And I genuinely think that culture is, we often talk about it, but it's so important to consistently, daily concentrate on it. People work for charities. People work for nothing. People work for organizations whose purpose and vision they believe fervently in. So, we can get really carried away with this thought about it's all about salaries and benefits. It isn't. It isn't about salaries and benefits. It's important. But what's much more important is what you say to people and how you then develop the goals of the business. So if you are going to talk about the dream when you interview people, then you better be delivering on that when they join you. Because, we often talk about EVP, employer value proposition. And EVP is an important thing because how the business looks from the outside should be consistent with the experience of working in that business when you're an employee. Those two things need to be absolutely aligned. When they're not aligned, in other words, people have sold the dream before they join, and then they join the business and discover very, very quickly, sometimes even within the first day or two, that what they were sold was fake, then you've already lost them inside the first week. So you can say what you like on the interview to get people hooked into the business, but you better be very clear that what you've said to them is true, it's authentic, that the experience they're going to have with you is absolutely consistent with what their expectations were. And those expectations, remember, were set by you when you interviewed them in the first instance. Now, I do think these things are incredibly important. I know absolutely that the people we work with have enormous integrity and honesty. we wouldn't work with them otherwise. So the truth is that the majority of people tell the truth when they interview people. If you're a small business and you're a startup, then you're going to tell the truth about that, and you're going to talk about, the challenges of growing a new business, which actually is very exciting and often very enjoyable. But you're not going to tell people that you're a solid business, that you've been around for years, that everything is very certain. It's an uncertain situation. You're setting up a new business. Equally, if you're a business that's been around for a period of time and you have examples of people who have started with you as junior consultants who are now directors, you bring that into the conversation. You show those case studies, you show those experiences, demonstrate how easy it is or to move on in the business, how we make it easy for you to grow and develop. So, it's got to be consistent. Talking about the dream has to be very specific, and explaining to people how they're going to move through the ranks, if that's what they're looking for, is important. Then demonstrating that when they join the business. You don't just address company culture annually when you sit down in a room with your senior team and discuss what we're going to do for the next 12 months. This is a daily conversation. It's a daily focus. It's something that you consistently work on. And it all comes down to outstanding communication from the leaders, making sure also that you have people in the organization who have the same attitude that you have, that you have champions within the business who are consistently saying the same things you're saying. If you get that great culture, then you can keep people for many, many, many years. And we're examples of that. There are people listening today that are examples of that. I stayed 17 years in one business. I stayed 12 years in another business. Why? Was I the best paid I could have been? Probably not. I might have been able to get more money somewhere else. In fact, I'm sure I could have done. But I was bought heart and soul into the purpose of the companies I worked for, and I loved working in those organizations. Great cultures. That's what it's about, developing great cultures, but it's about being authentic. It's not the words, it's the deeds that matter.
I think it's important when we start to look at that is people will measure. If I will say, if you can measure something, you can improve something. And how do you measure the things that you've promised people? And I think it's very simple. If you are looking at your monthly reviews, quarterly reviews, annual reviews, etc., if those things that you've talked about, these are things that we've promised you, and these are things then that are in those reviews, then you will know whether you're delivering on those or not, but so will your employees. And those things then are brought to the forefront of everybody's minds constantly.
Amazon calling, hang on, I'll be back.
Nothing new there, Paul, with you. So it's about having that foresight to say, if we're going to offer something in our onboarding, etc., that we actually then start to measure the impact that has, but we also start to talk about it with the employees on a more regular basis. And that way they can constantly see the things that they're being offered, the things that are happening. They can see the move and change within their business. And sometimes employees can't see the move and change because they think it's just part and parcel of what happens, but constantly reminding them of what you're doing. And that constant reminder is all about their improvement of their job and the enjoyment. That makes it tighter for them to stay with the company. It makes them see what the company's doing, where sometimes then stepping out into the unknown becomes a real problem. Because if they're asking, do you deliver this, etc., they're the things, the questions that you should be asking your next employer. But if it's not happening, then people are going to leave. So you've got to start to measure it, I think, really, really stringently. And last week, Paul, we talked a lot about team leaders and how important they are in the retention and the attrition of employees. And obviously said last week that training for all managers is vitally important. So besides training of management, what else should the business provide the management spine in order to retain employees?
Okay, so as you say, we addressed this point last week, and we talked a lot about making sure that team leaders particularly were people that we spent a large amount of time on. Quite recently, just anecdotally, with certain businesses where we felt that certain elements of the business needed to improve, even though we trained the consultants very well, we felt that the reason that we weren't seeing quite the improvements we were looking for was coming down to the fact that the team leaders, if that's the expression, weren't necessarily receiving the adequate direction and training from the senior management, and we've corrected that. So, focusing at your senior team leaders is vitally important. Giving them consistent opportunities to develop and grow is important. We, as you know, Howard, we provide mentoring very often for that level, if you like, of people in organizations, because the idea here is to help those senior managers develop further, to move to the next levels. Vitally important when you're in growth mode. Also incredibly important in terms of retaining people. So providing mentors to help them to grow as business professionals, or indeed on a personal level, I think is extremely important, incredibly valuable. And the people that we mentor, and I was mentored, so was you, Howard, we've always appreciated that. I think people genuinely feel that they feel valued by their businesses beyond being trained to do their jobs correctly, or indeed improving them in those areas. That personal touch makes a massive difference to people. I also think, the point about transparency is very important to this point. If you want to make sure your senior management team, your team leaders, your managers are going to stay long-term with the business, there's a number of things you need to be very clear on. Firstly, constant transparency around where the business is going, what's happening, how well we're doing. And if we are doing well, great, we're going to celebrate that. If we're not doing so well, how are we going to correct it? But real transparency around business performance, not just their own areas, but the company as a whole. It's also about giving them more and more opportunity to take on additional responsibilities. So looking to see what else they can do. This comes down to directors and owners delegating more, which is obviously what every owner wants to do, every director wants to do. We often have enormously talented people in businesses who are very capable and very willing to take on more responsibilities. That definitely engenders a longer or length of tenure in a business. If you believe you're being developed, you're gaining new experiences, even being placed into uncomfortable positions, which ultimately will help you strengthen as a person, then you're much more likely to stay. If you're involved in exciting new projects, or you're taking on more responsibilities on behalf of your boss, the owners of the business, and you feel trusted, you feel that people have given you responsibility, and you feel you must deliver upon those responsibilities, you're very likely to stay. You're very likely to want to continue to be part of that business. So being involved, having your opinion listened to, being involved in what's going on in running the company, across the board, not just across your area. These are the important areas. Getting people absolutely integrated into your organization at a senior level, and not doing the opposite, keeping them in the dark, only feeding them bits and pieces. Those things are the things that drive people away. But obviously, the other last point I'd make here is leading by example, because clearly people work for people. We buy people, we buy into people. We talk about businesses as a generic statement, but actually people buy into people, not just from the perspective when we sell our business, when we're selling our business services to our clients, but also internally. We work for people. So the people we work for or with have to demonstrate the right behaviors, the right attitudes, be role models for the people that report into them. These things combined make a big difference. Plus, lastly, and we said it a moment ago, making sure that we're remunerating them correctly, that we're always reviewing their commission or bonus plans, their benefits, and making sure that they're well looked after in so many ways, both from a pastoral perspective, but also from a financial perspective and from a career development perspective.
So when we talk about that training, that's the sort of things that we talk about when we help train and develop our leaders of tomorrow, etc. And I think the big area that companies need to start to really look at, and the next ask the question here, my acronym for terror, to me the R bit is the bit that really we need to start to think about. And the R bit is rank, and it's rank not as in sergeant major, etc., but it's how you make people feel. So if I am the employee, how do I feel within the ranks of the business? Do you make me feel more important, as important, less important? How does the management make you feel within that business? And we talked about it last week. It's not about, people always remember the things that you do, but they'll remember more how they made you feel. And so if you make people feel that they are part of the business, or you make them feel that they are, you're wanted within the business and you're trying to help and develop them, then obviously they'll go further. And all the things that you talked about there, Paul, about remuneration, training and development, knowing where the company's going, etc., is all part of that. And then the final part of that acronym is autonomy. As a new person, having the autonomy to actually speak your mind without the fear of retribution from your management is really important. And sometimes I would talk to some of the new people that come into the business and I'd find so much things that is absolutely, key to developing the business, because these people are coming into your business with a fresh pair of eyes. But if they're afraid to say things, then you'll never learn, because everything becomes the norm to everybody else after a certain period of time. So to me, from a management's point of view, it would be looking at how you can actually help people. And to me, the big things today is finding out what motivates that person, so you can start to work on that motivation, both internally from a work point of view and externally from a personal point of view. We look at that, and we've already said, the attrition in year one is huge. Okay. And certainly the highest part of attrition in recruitment is in that first year to 18 months. We know that most businesses don't make a profit out of an employee, or make very little profit out of an employee in those first 12 months. So what does a company need to do in order to ensure the employee on average stays more than 36 months?
It's all of the above. I mean, it is making sure that we are, particularly, I think, where people demonstrate real talent and are very keen to develop their careers, that we fast track people. Too often, I think, we can be guilty of wrapping people in cotton wool. It's always a question of, are they ready yet for the next step forward? I don't know about you. In fact, I do know about you, actually, Howard, in this sense, because I was in the same position. I didn't receive that treatment. I think I was forever being pushed into the next role. I was willing to do that. I wanted to do that. Very often I found myself in new opportunities that I actually wanted desperately, but then discovered when I got there, I was actually incapable of doing the job to the extent I thought I could do it. It was hard work, but I got there in the end. And I'm a believer that if you've got talented people, that we should be fast tracking them as quickly as we can. We know that. It's not about length of tenure. Our business, thankfully, has always been a meritocracy, our industry. If you're good enough, you're old enough. It's simple as that, really. And it's not unusual to see people being fast tracked in businesses and getting more senior roles than others that have been in the business for longer. This is all about ability, all about talent. So keeping people beyond those first 2 years, 3 years, it's then about career development. It's making sure that the individual feels they're being developed, they're moving forward. That has to be aligned, of course, with the company's expectations and aspirations, where the organization is going. There aren't many people who will continue to work for years and years for companies that stagnate. When you have great people in your business, you're almost compelled to grow. One of the major reasons, when I think back to my Office Angels days of taking the organization from 60 odd offices to 120 in a space of 2-3 years, was very much based upon the fact that we needed to grow the company in order to retain the talent in the business. If we'd failed to give people promotional opportunities and stretch them, those very people that we loved and adored, who we trained very hard, who were now brilliant, would have disappeared, worked for our competitors, or opened our own businesses and attacked our business. I wasn't going to let that happen. It was a major driver for developing and growing my business. So I think when you get to a point where you've identified talent within your organization, and that generally happens within that time frame, I think it's absolutely, it's an important issue for you to be looking at. How do we move this person forward? How do we give them more responsibilities? How do we promote them? How do we develop them? If people consistently feel that their careers are moving forward, aligned with the company's performance, that the business itself is developing, and they're still bought in, and you make sure that they are, because we talked about cultural alignment, and that's a daily mantra, they are much more likely to stay with you than not. If, on the other hand, the business stagnates, you don't promote people, you hold them back, you suppress their development and their talent, of course they're going to leave you.
See, it's interesting, isn't it? I write the questions before I do any of the research, because I think, it's the easiest part to do. So I do that first, but that last stat that we read out, a good onboarding program leads to 69% of employees staying at least 3 years, which says to me that that onboarding program isn't just the first 3 months, 6 months of someone's career. That onboarding program should be run until that person offboards from the company, which means then if you've got a career development plan and you are following that career development plan and it has numerous routes for them to go down, it means that that person always understands where they're going. So they always understand what's expected of them. They always feel part of the tribe, and if you make them feel that they are the most important person in your business and they have the autonomy to speak to you about their development, then we start to grow and we start to push people beyond that sort of 12, 18-month period and to stay longer after 36 months. We know, when you start to look at the big companies, the highest part of attrition is in that 9 to 18 months period. And yet how many people do we know, if we said once you've got them for 3, they'll be there for 6. Once they're there for 6, we know they're going to be there for 12 years. And that's the pit when you start to get them into that sort of process. And to do that, you've got to keep the vultures from the door. And to keep the vultures from the door, you have to be giving them opportunity and grow their opportunities constantly, as you said. But to do that, then you have to have an onboarding program which includes a really strong career development plan. It has what's in it for them, but you're then measuring yourself against that plan with them on a monthly, quarterly basis, so they can see it's actually being delivered and moving forward. So one last question, Paul. I think it's an interesting question. All predictions are that the market is starting to flatten and dropping from its high point. So if you were managing a business, what would you do now to ensure your stars of today and the future are still part of the business and helps it sail through the potential storm that's coming?
It's a great question. Great leaders, really, really inspirational leaders and managers are the people that are consistently anticipating what's coming in the direction of the company. They're certainly involved and they live in the moment, but they spend a tremendous amount of time looking forward. What's going to be happening in 6, 9 months, a year? How do we know that? Well, of course, we can read the media, we listen to what's going on around us, but we know really through talking closely to our clients. What are they thinking? What are they thinking about in terms of where their business is going to be in 6, 9, 12 months' time? So the answer to this question really, I think, is about making sure that if there is a storm, and I don't think there's going to be quite the storm that people are predicting, but if we are going into a recessionary climate from, let's say, January onwards, and we'd be foolish to think that it's not going to be a more challenging winter than last winter, which was extraordinarily good off the back of COVID lockdowns closing. We had an extraordinary winter. So clearly this winter, regardless, was never going to be as strong as the previous winter. What could possibly be as strong? That was a one-off. But if we are heading into choppier waters, potentially we are, then I think it's about providing great leadership. And that means that you are open about what needs to be done over the next 3-4 months in terms of getting closer to clients, upskilling people, getting people to work in different ways because we anticipate the market's going to be different. So for example, companies have been drowning in vacancies, recruitment businesses have been drowning in vacancies over the last 12 to 15 months. If those vacancies dry up a little bit, it's going to be a candidate-driven market. And that means making sure our people know how to market candidates, how to market map, how to find people. It also means that we need to be heavily in front of clients over the next 3-4 months. This is what great managers do, great leaders do. They're able to see ahead and start to work in advance of any potential issues. And you do that by making it very apparent to people what's going on. You get them involved in those conversations. You talk about the strategies, you get their involvement, you get their opinion, and you get a uniformed attitude. And if people are pulling together and they can see the direction the company is going in and they recognize strong management, they feel secure and safe, they're very likely to stay. They're very likely to stay. But if they feel there's a panic, if they feel that their owners or leaders have absolutely no clue as to how to deal with what's coming, they will look for a safer place to work. So I think a lot of this is down to very strong leadership, being aware of what clients and candidates are seeking, and being ahead of the game, planning for the future, anticipating what's likely to be happening, showing by example outstanding leadership qualities.
So I think that comment that comes out, isn't it? Plan for the best, prepare for the worst, is something that sort of needs to be on every sort of manager's lips at this moment in time. And that's then looking through your staff and looking at who has the potential, right from your rising stars to your current, big performers, who has the potential to help you ride that potential storm that's coming. And then what are you doing to secure their services? Because obviously there's lots of people that are still pushing out that, come join us type situation. And I think that's all part of that as a management team, looking at what you are doing, because recruitment is too much, live for today. How many jobs have we got on? How many candidates have we got out? How many interviews have we got? How many CVs we've got? Rather than looking at what's it going to look like in 6 months? What's it going to look like in 12 months? You can see the economic cycles coming. Yeah. How big the drop is or how big the increase is debatable always. But obviously, if you plan for the best and prepare for the worst, then you're covering both sides of the coin. And I think we've got to constantly look at what we're planning to do. And that means not just from a business point of view, but from a staff point of view. And so if you're helping your staff develop their own business and their own clients, etc., then that will safeguard the business. And we said this right at the beginning of lockdown, didn't we? If you look after your people, they will look after your clients. Right. If your clients are looked after, then they will look after you. If you look after yourself first, guess what? Your candidates, your consultants, and your clients are more than likely going to leave you. So you've got to start to think about looking after your people first, and then they will look after your clients, who will alternatively then look after you at the end. And I think that's all about that. Everything that we've talked about today and more, it's all about how people feel within your business and how you make them feel constantly in your business. So that's
getting tight. Get tight to your clients, get tight to your staff, understand what's going on. Really, this is now all about it's very sharp focus. But you're right, Howard. If people feel valued and they feel involved and they understand what's happening, they're bought into what you're trying to do, they're going to stick with you.
Yeah. So I'd look at that the other way around. Look after your people first, and your people look after your clients. If you look after your clients first, you're chasing money, in my view, and then you're looking after your people. So look after your people first. They will then look after your clients and drive them from your clients. So next week, we're going to discuss one of the things that lots of employees moan about, complain about. It's one of the big reasons why people leave recruitment businesses outside of managers, and that's the bottleneck in people's processes. So are your processes killing your businesses? Are your bottlenecks killing your businesses? And we're going to start to talk about the bottlenecks next week, because I think it's important as we start to move into the next phase of recovery from out of lockdown, and whatever that will be, whether it be growth or whether it be dropping down again. Smoothing out your bottlenecks will help retain your staff, retain your clients, and make your business quicker, faster, and more agile to cope with whatever's coming. Paul, thanks very much. Good to see you again.
And you.
Ladies and gents, thanks very much for your time. Much appreciated as always. We look forward to seeing you next week. And the video of this will be on the website and YouTube by the end of the day. See you all next week. Thanks very much.
Thanks, everybody. Take good care.